Scandal is a word that is very familiar in the sports world. Just look at Tiger Woods and how his career kind of blew up after it came out that he was having multiple affairs with multiple different women. However, not every scandals in the athletic community are just one big story. For example, we can look at Hope Solo, who we're actually going to talk about today, and she's considered the best female goalkeeper in the world. And today we're just going to look at her scandals and how they spanned over many, many years and were far from few. So many of you might be sitting in your seats and saying, I don't even know who Hope Solo is, I don't even like soccer, why is this important to talk about? And it's important to address her and her controversies because she's someone who represents our country and puts a face to our country globally when she participates in games such as the Olympics and the World Cup. So, as an avid soccer fan myself and someone who has followed all of Hope Solo's many mistakes, we're going to talk about her journey and her soccer career today, really just covering who she is, why she's such a big name in soccer, kind of her minor scandals, and then the really big scandal that really pushed her over the top and ended in the termination of her contract with the women's national soccer team. So, before we get into the scandals, we really have to discover who Hope Solo is. So, like I said before, she is considered the best female goalkeeper in the world. She's won 2 Olympic gold medals, and she was part of the 2015 women's soccer team that won the World Cup, which is like Olympics but just for soccer. And in an article called Curtains for an Outspoken Star, Jonathan Mailer also chronicles a lot of the records she holds. And she has 202 international appearances, and she's won over 75% of those games. So this is spanning over years. This goes from about 2002 to 2008. And she also holds the longest undefeated streak at 55 games, which is pretty big in the soccer world. So now that we know who Hope Solo is, we can really start getting into why she's kind of like a scandalous player. So the research paper Hard Return by Grant Wall really depicts her first scandal quite nicely and vividly. And it occurred at the 2007 World Cup. And the head soccer coach decided to play a veteran goalkeeper over Hope Solo in the semifinals. And the U.S. ended up losing that game. And so afterwards, when Hope Solo was interviewed, she told the reporter that if she had been the goalkeeper, she would have been able to stop the shots that the goalkeeper who played didn't, and that the coach made a wrong decision by not playing her. And that really did not go over well with her teammates, her coaches, really our country. Just because those were very disrespectful comments to a goalkeeper who had already won 2 Olympics before her. So she was ostracized by the team, she had to eat alone, she had to fly home from the World Cup alone. It was kind of a big deal, but no official actions were taken. The Washington Post also put out a story that gave a nice chronological timeline of all her scandals until the next one came in 2012 when her and her then fiance got into a domestic altercation, and that night they were cleared of everything and they actually got married the next day. And then in 2014, she was charged with 4th-degree assault charges for abusing her sister and her nephew. So that's like a very scary charge, and those charges were dismissed only because her sister and her nephew didn't want to testify, so they left the state. And then in 2015, her husband got a DUI, and she was suspended for 30 days because of this, because her husband was actually driving a national team van. So like that is huge, and she was in the passenger seat. So that ended with a 30-day suspension. And then in 2016, leading up to the Olympics in Brazil, you can see in this picture, she posted a lot of pictures on social media, just kind of going way over the top about the whole Zika virus. You can see she says, not sharing this, get your own. And I mean, it's a little much, and she posted another photo where she had like 30 insect repellent canisters laid out all on her bed, and she was like, not sharing. So a lot of people did not handle this well, and it was actually really funny because every single time she touched the ball in the World Cup, people would boo her, and when she kicked the ball, they would all shout, Zika! So it was actually really funny watching it, and she kind of deserved it. So the nail in the coffin, like, to her career that really ended it is depicted really nicely in the article Olympic Spirit Controversy Still Under Spotlight as U.S. Soccer Benches Solo. And this occurred in the 2016 Olympics. In the quarterfinals, they played the Swedish national team, and it was really interesting because the Swedish national team's coach had just led the U.S. women's national team to the World Cup championships a year before. So obviously the coach knew how U.S. played. And after losing the game to the Swedish national team, Hope Solo called them a bunch of cowards, and she said that the U.S. should have won and the better team didn't win. So this really is like the epitome of bad sportsmanship, and it was really, really awful, and a lot of people didn't agree with her statements. The New York Times did a piece about the consequences she received, which she was suspended for 6 months from the national team, but she also had her national contract terminated, which means after those 6 months, she probably wouldn't go back to the national team because she didn't have a contract anymore. And they really analyzed this decision that the Soccer Federation made, and they concluded that it was because the Soccer Federation and her head coach had to talk to her so many times about the correct behavior of a professional athlete who represents our country on the national team. And obviously she never listened to those discussions or listened to their advice or what they were telling her. So it is very clear to see that Hope Solo is no stranger to scandals. And she will probably never return to an international career of soccer just because she's going to be super old by the time that she can play again. And just everything she's done has really tainted her career and tainted her reputation. So although she's a super big name and she is really phenomenal, I've seen her play before and she really is the best of the best. She has disrespected soccer so many different times in so many different ways that she will never return on an international level. Thank you.
Okay. Vanessa, how did this one go for you?
It went good. I said like a couple filler words. I kind of forgot what I was going to say for a second, but it popped back up into my head soon.
Okay. Based on what you're working on to improve for the quarter, where do you feel like what's helped you in terms of the research that you've done?
Just practicing a lot. One thing I wanted to work on was like slowing down my speech, the rate I talked at, and then also being more conversational. So really like practicing, but not practicing too much.
Okay. Are you feel like you're finding that balance?
I'm like getting there.
You're getting yeah. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. Teammates, if you could.
I know you said that you were working on slowing down, but like it was still pretty quick. You had really good volume though. Definitely nice and loud. And then one more thing about delivery was the whole time you were kind of gripping the table, or like you had your hands on it. And so if you could just take a step back, and just be a little bit more removed from it. That way you're not having to worry about that, and you're kind of like rolling on your feet as well. Just be a little bit more relaxed.
Your content was really well developed, and it definitely showed that you put a lot of effort into developing this topic, and I think you did a really nice job with that. Yeah, I just say slow down your rate a little bit. You seem really, your personality comes out when you're up there, and you have a lot of like pep in your step, and I like that. So, nice job.
You had really nice structure, and I liked how you gave us the actual visual of what you did and then the big finale, and so I think that was good. You had nice transitions.
You also really laid out the scandals chronologically really well, and then ended with like a conclusion that I thought like summed up the subject very well.
All right, Vanessa, an interesting topic to